Man cannot follow the law and God. You cannot obey the law and God. A Christian cannot live in a culture founded on law and be part of the church. The church and the law are at odds, and indeed, they are incompatible. We look for evil in the darkest of places, but the devil was an angel of light. He knows how to excite the flesh, and it is not with abhorrent things. The abhorrent things come later, created by men consumed by evil. These men learn to hate those less infected than they, with evil. The evil things we see are a symptom of the evil we are in. But the devil does not tempt us with what is offensive, but with what seems good to us. Gambling is not advertised by its results, but by the chance of winning. The momentary pleasure of winning is portrayed, not the loss of everything to a gambling addiction. Drugs are not promoted by the portrayal of the life of a drug addict, but by the environment in which drugs are introduced. The drug-induced high is the image we are given, not the life in which one has become both addicted and desensitized to drugs. At some point one dies of an overdose or pays for all the highs with a massive and seemingly endless low as one goes through withdrawal. What is more noble than saving the life of a child? Evil is always given a noble mission. If introducing pornography to preschoolers and permitting children to marry at 9, saves one child's life, it is worth it. If X is good, then there is no Y that justifies withholding X or doing whatever will produce X. This is the formulae of evil. We need to bubble wrap our children and not do anything that will cause them any anxiety. Never reject your child for any reason. Love them for whatever they are and regardless of what they do. Therefore, all power is taken from you. Evil captures you by asking you not to do evil, not to do harm. Evil goes so far as to ask us not to insult, or belittle, or deny others. We are asked to be understanding, peaceful, and forgiving. The devil will even quote scripture and tell us we must turn the other cheek rather than offend, harm or diminish someone. This is absurd and as corrupting as saying food is good so eat. Things are not good or bad in and of themselves. There must be context. This is not the same thing as saying everything is relative. Your culture is not relative to what God allows. The age of consent is not a relativistic term or a concept that must be considered in context. Cultural relativity is a term out of hell. Anti-racism, diversity is our strength and don't discriminate are all hellish ideas promoted by demonic forces and the devil's own brigade. There is a right and wrong and there is a division between them. Satan does not love little children, and he is not trying to save them. His advice ought to be suspect. The principle that all human life is valuable and that no human life is quite so valuable as the life of a child, is not advanced because the devil honors life or wants to save it. The devil makes these statements as a prelude to making laws. The devil advances a good so he can corrupt it and turn it into something degraded. Because the good he advocates is only the illusion of good, it is a good designed to attract the spiritually immature. It does not matter what the idea is, so long as it can be formulated into a law. Law is justified on the grounds that it seeks to do good. Whatever the law is, people will disagree, and people will not follow it, that is, all laws are broken by just about everyone at some point or other, and this gives those who have implemented the law to create other law until the law itself becomes tyrannical. At this point people have no choice but to embrace evil. We do evil by following the law or by breaking the law. The law is not created to bring joy into the world, but to sow division. The division always results in the issue of more laws, and generally, the law over time becomes more draconian to deal with the lawbreakers. This is why there is a general tendency of the world to, over time, evolve towards globalism. Globalism is generally defined as a one-world government that owns and controls everything. Looking behind this we see a single jurisprudence. If there is a one-world government that owns and controls everything, it is grounded in a particular and universal, legal apparatus. The government is simply the manifestation of the law. The law creates or manifests the state. The state might have a department of transportation, but if it has no law governing it and no law it uses to govern others, it has no identity. It would not even have a name unless there is a law legitimizing the name. We do not spend enough time looking at the path to legitimacy. We can see and claim a pond, but how do we legitimize this claim? We did not create the water or the pond, so right from the start we have no natural right to it. The fallback option is to threaten those who challenge your claim with harm, and if required, do violence to those who challenge your claim, until you either lose your claim or everyone else chooses to recognize your claim. This, however, takes us back to the earliest days when a person's position in society was determined by martial prowess. Ownership was determined by your ability to fight and bring others into alignment with your position. The person owned whatever he could possess by means of threats of violence and actual harm done to those who opposed his ownership and claims to being ruler and owner. The ruler of a kingdom was the owner of that kingdom, and everyone else was a vassal. People either had the ability to protect their freedom from others, or they were a vassal and slave. Freedom was a good, but it was not a right. All rights, as Mao is reputed to have said, come out of the barrel of a gun. One has the rights one can take, and without this ability to acquire rights by the power of one's hand, all one has is a privilege. The state claims freedom is a right, while making it a privilege using the law to take the right and reissue it as a privilege under the law. It does this same thing with ownership rights and much else. There are no rights under the law because if the right is assigned by law, it is a right only under the law. We have said a right is something we can take and defend. To do this we need power, and to have power, we need property. The most fundamental right is the right to what we create. This is the right to personal property. The law does not recognize this right. Personal property is only conditionally owned. In many countries we are not permitted to protect our personal property. We have no right to it. The rights we have are conditional and defined by law. That right or privilege not specifically assigned to us by law, does not exist. The law enslaves but God liberates. We cannot be free under the law because the law must be protected and enforced. If the law is prioritized, then those under the law are not free. The law is an idol. If we are under the law and must follow the law, then we in effect, worship the law. The law is our reality and our God. We even give up our human identity to take on a new, legal identity defined by a name in all capitals. It is a transmutation of identity. We take on the persona of a subject in order to partake of the benefits provided by the state. The state offers us protection from it without the law. By becoming an ally of the state it agrees to live within the law it creates. Becoming a subject, we become members of a protection racket and thereby join the state in perpetuating and enforcing the protection racket on others. The worst offenders are those in the Justice Department, apart from those in the military. The Justice Department is as aligned with the legal system as it is possible to be, without engaging in the creation of law. Populism is hated by the jurisprudential state because populism is antithetical to the regulatory state. We threaten not just the power of the legalists, but their livelihoods. We represent a loss of their privilege and prestige, the honor they bestow themselves with legalese titles and honorifics properly reserved for God. The law is incompatible with God and with a free people under God. The devil tempts us with law, suggesting the law will fix all that is wrong with others, because we do not like God telling us to fix first what is wrong with us. The law cannot do this. Populism basically tells us to fit in with reality, with the perfection God created. We compare ourselves to perfection to see how unfinished a work we are. A work done in faith corrects us. However, people want others to be corrected because they do not believe they are the problem. However, no one has the ability to control or fix others, so they conspire with a mighty man to fix others through the means of the law. This is where it all begins. It begins with a hardening of the heart and a lack of faith in God, which says that if we fix ourselves others will still be the problem. And so these servants of Satan conspire with the state to fix us. They think they will not be affected because they assume the law will reflect their goals and agenda. Because of this, they never fix their heart. Following rules cannot fix us because we have stopped exercising our moral conscience. We stop thinking about what is right and wrong and we only concern ourselves with what is legal and illegal. In effect, our minds play around with what we can get away with. In effect, we become manipulators of the law, always looking for the loophole, always looking for a legal way to justify and legitimize what we are doing, no longer caring if it is morally right or fair. This explains the way the world is today. It no longer matters what the consequences are, so long as the practice skirts the law. So long as we technically are within the law, we are satisfied we are doing what is okay. What harm is done is immaterial, it is something for the law to worry about, not us, because what we do is within the black and white and literal interpretation of the law. But this is not what God is about. We can do no harm, meaning we cannot create costs others pay. If the worker has a right to his wages, then we have no right to impose costs or obligations or consequences on others, that deprive anyone of the wealth they create. Those that do are parasites, whatever the justification. Here is where it gets interesting, because civil persons do not need the law, and in fact the law will always be a negative factor in civil society. So, why do we have the law if the civilized do not need the law? It is because there is a sharp distinction between the civil and the subject, and between the civilized and subjects. What has gone wrong is that we have not defined what it means to be a citizen, and we have not linked our social status with civility or civilizational requirements. Indeed, nations have removed all conditionalities to the status of citizen, and so what used to be at best, a subject or even criminal can now be an honored citizen. God makes civilizations. The law makes subjects and legalists. To have a true civil society, citizenship must be linked to the achievement of set standards. We have no right to impose our costs onto others, and so the minimum requirement to move from minor to adult and citizen is the achievement of self-reliance. The applicant must demonstrate an ability to live without parasitic impositions on society and future generations.